We appreciate being joined today by the Finance Sector Union State Secretary for South Australia, Jason Hall. Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Ricky, and hello to your listeners.
Look, we picked up on some commentary you're putting out there about bank branch closures across regional South Australia. Just run through what those closures are and what they mean for local communities.
Well, currently the last statement from Westpac, 95 branches in the past 4 months, but the ones we're concerned about in South Australia in the current announcement are Coober Pedy, Kapunda and Tailem Bend, who sadly are also the last bank in their town.
Now, some people wouldn't be familiar or aware perhaps that in the case of, say, Kapunda, Westpac and Bankers SA, what's the linkage there?
Well, Westpac owns Bank SA, so it's all a decision by one group, a group that makes billions of dollars a year, and you think they could keep these branches open to service these regional communities.
Yep, but so that's the Bank SA and Kapunda's going as well. Now, I believe these are also the last bank branches that were open in those three towns.
Yeah, that's right, Ricky, and that makes a really big impact to those local communities where people now have to travel considerable distance to be able to do their banking, and we know that has an impact on regional towns because when somebody has to go to the next major town to do their banking, they do their other shopping there, and that has a flow-on effect to all of the businesses in the local town.
Yeah, we hear that, for instance, with Coober Pedy, it's more than 500 kilometres just to get to the bank now at Port Augusta, classic example.
Yeah, and that becomes completely unfeasible for those people that are unable to make those travels, whether it's elderly people that find that travelling those distances a struggle, or people with disabilities, etc. This is a real abandonment of those communities.
And when it comes to the trend line with banks, like you say, there was 95 odd in recent months from one particular banking group. Is this just generally where banks are heading, is just shutting down branches, regional and suburban?
Yeah, well, we've had, as I said, nearly 50 branches closed just in SA over the last couple of years, and I think we're up to about 650 nationally. This is a trend, and we're calling on the federal government actually to stop it and start an inquiry to try and stop the banks from deserting these regional Australia specifically.
Well, I think there is actually an inquiry. We speak to a federal MP regularly. She has been on this inquiry into regional bank closures. I guess that's more specific about regionals. But, you know, what can a federal government actually do to stop, I guess, private banks closing branches? Is there something in terms of the way they fund or tax banks to address this?
Well, the outcomes of an inquiry could have ranging things, including making sure that banks provide services to regional communities and maintaining footprints. Decisions like that can be made at a federal level. We've seen overseas other legislation in places where complete community impact statements need to be put in place, and if those impact statements show that there's a group of people being disadvantaged, the bank has to continue to provide those services.
I guess when you look at the impact of these closures for local people, they can be quite damaging. In some respects, Australia Post likes to think it's sort of stepped into the breach. Is that where the federal government sort of can play a role as well?
Well, I know Australia Post does pick up some of the transactions for branches when they close, but of course, if you've got more complicated queries and stuff, it makes it a lot more difficult. So, which is why we want to keep these branches open. All of these branches, for example, are already on restricted trading hours, and there's other opportunities or other solutions. We have other banks, for example, who keep the branches open and then use the staff to do kind of their normal kind of back office, customer service calling roles, but keep the doors open. So there's other solutions the banks can look at.
And doesn't it seem odd that we've got bank branch closures in regional areas when there's been a tree change or a vine change or a sea change going on? People are getting out of cities and living in regional areas, and they can do their jobs through teleworking anyway?
Oh, 100%, and that's exactly what I'm saying, that there's opportunities even for the workers in these branches to continue to do other back office work but keep the branch doors open. And we are seeing that migration to the local communities. I actually grew up in Kapunda. I went to Kapunda High School, and that's one of the branches closing. And we know that there's people still moving out there currently and doing remote work. So there's people in these local communities, and they deserve to be serviced by the banks that have grown and become profitable because of the support from regional communities.
Yeah, good point, Jason. It's been a rough trot for Kapunda people, particularly those that went to the school. Parts of the school burned down, and now their bank branches closing as well.
Oh, exactly. A rough trot indeed.
All right. Well, Jason Hall, the State Secretary for the Finance Sector Union, thanks for joining us today here on Flow. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, and thanks to your listeners.